Hello guys, this is your friend. And we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto Got Harem with Hinata, Hanabi and Tenten Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Naruto walked out of the academy muttering under his breath about stupid clones. While he was walking, he saw his instructor and another teacher talking to each other. Naruto ran up to him and asked, "Hey Sekiden-sensei, can you help me with my clones? They always look like they're dying when I do the jutsu." Sekiden answered with a fake smile, "Sorry Naruto, but the year is over, you will have to wait until next year." "But what am I going to do for the next 2 months?" Naruto asked. The Chunin thought for a moment and said, "How about this?" While reaching into his weapon pouch and pulled out a scroll. "This is a Fuinjutsu scroll, work on this over the summer," handing the scroll over to Naruto. "What's Fuinjutsu?" Naruto asked with a confused look on his face. "It's the sealing arts. Have you ever wondered how some of the teachers get weapons out of scrolls?" The teacher asked. Naruto nodded his head and Sekiden continued, "That is Fuinjutsu, and even the Hokage knows some Fuinjutsu. The fourth was a Fuinjutsu master." Naruto, hearing that his idol was great at Fuinjutsu, was more than enough for him to accept the scroll. "Thanks Sekiden-sensei, I'll master this scroll in no time," Naruto said as he started to walk home, leaving the two Chunin by themselves. The Chunin with Sekiden asked, "Why did you give the demon that scroll?" Sekiden snorted and answered, "Like that brat could learn the sealing arts. It's one of the hardest arts to learn." His friend nodded, "I suppose you're right, even I have trouble with the basics." "Come on, let's get out of here," Sekiden said as they two left the academy. Naruto ran all the way to his apartment holding onto the scroll tightly. When he got to his apartment, he cleaned off the table in his kitchen of all the empty ramen containers and opened the scroll and started to read. Naruto read the first 2 feet of the scroll and got out some ink and paper. The scroll suggested that Naruto practice calligraphy before getting into drawing seals. The scroll had an example of some words written in calligraphy, so Naruto gave those words a try. It was about an hour before Naruto decided that while his handwriting wasn't too bad, he was going to have to work on it. Naruto was going to need a book on calligraphy. He would have to go to the library, but he knew that the old bat that ran it wouldn't let him in. But lucky for Naruto, stealth was one of his best skills, so that shouldn't be a problem. That night Naruto was able to get a few books on calligraphy and he started to practice. His handwriting wasn't that bad to begin with, so it took about a week before he attempted his first seal. The first few days were frustrating as he would look at the scroll and draw the seal, but there were small mistakes, so when he got his first storage seal to not blow up on activation, Naruto was ecstatic. With that, it only took another week to learn all that the scroll had to offer. Now that Naruto had mastered that scroll and the library didn't have any more on Fuinjutsu for some reason, he was headed to the Hokage's office. When he got there, he said hi to the secretary, a young woman who was always nice to him, and walked into his Sarutobi Jiji's office. Sarutobi greeted Naruto as he walked in and gave him a break from all the paperwork. "Hello there Naruto, how can I help you today?" Naruto smiled as he sat in one of the chairs and said, "Hi Jiji, I came to say hi and ask you something." "What is it you wanted to ask me Naruto?" Sarutobi asked. "Well, I started to learn Fuinjutsu and I was wondering if you had some books I could borrow," Naruto asked. Sarutobi looked a bit surprised and asked, "Really Naruto, Fuinjutsu is a very complicated and dangerous art to use, if not used right." Naruto took out the scroll that his teacher gave him and the one he made. "I got this scroll from my sensei. He gave me this scroll after I failed to make one of those stupid clones. It was pretty easy to do and I even made this other scroll to hold all my weapons in," demonstrating by poofing out a kunai. Sarutobi asked, "So you have only had that scroll for 2 weeks?" Naruto nodded and the Hokage thought for a moment, "That is pretty good for someone who just started. Maybe I could give Naruto his parents' Fuinjutsu books, they have some of their notes on them." It could help him a lot. The Hokage got up and went to a storage room in his office and moved some boxes to where a safe was. After entering the combination and some quick hand seals, the safe opened. In the safe were several scrolls. He took them out of the safe and went back to his desk. He tossed the scrolls to Naruto, who nearly dropped them. "What are these?" Naruto asked as he looked at the white scrolls with the numbers 1 through 4 on them. "A friend of mine liked seals and these are his scrolls with his notes in them." The Sarutobi said, "You can have these. But they aren't mine," said Naruto. "The friend I'm talking about is no longer with us and he would want someone to learn from him. Sealing was one of his best arts," Sarutobi said. Naruto thought for a moment and said, "Okay Gigi, I'll work as hard as I can to master Fuinjutsu and make you and your friend proud." Then ran up to his Gigi and gave him a hug and said, "Thank you." "Now Naruto, about the academy," said Sarutobi, "you will be put with your age group next year. I think we were getting a little ahead of ourselves sending you in 2 years early." "Okay Gigi, I better go so you can get back to your paperwork," said Naruto. The Hokage looked at his paperwork that seemed to double in size since he last looked at it and sweat dropped. "Alright Naruto, be sure to be in room 213 at the academy when the break is over," Sarutobi said. "See you later," Naruto said as he ran out of the room. Well, their son would take an interest in seals. If this pans out, we could have another seal master in the village, Sarutobi thought. Over the next month and a half, Naruto studied the first scroll, which had 15 books in it. He got through the first 2 and was working on the third. He even thought up some new pranks with the seals that he knew. He went to class early on his first day to put what he had learned to use. Naruto got in and there wasn't anyone there yet, so he got to work. He got done with only a few minutes to spare, so he sat down in the back of the class and waited for the show. The class began to fill up, and as the bell was about to ring, Naruto's new teacher came in. He had brown hair, tan skin, and a scar over his nose. "My name is Iruka Umino. I'm introducing myself because we have a new student with us today," Iruka said, and everyone looked at Naruto. "Why don't you introduce yourself?" Naruto smiled at getting all this attention and said, "Hi, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. I like ramen, fuinjutsu, and pranking. I don't dislike many things and my dream is to be Hokage." Naruto said the last part with excitement. Iruka frowned a little at the pranking part but smiled at what Naruto's dream was and said, "That's a good dream, Naruto, and you have a lot of work if you want to reach it, and please don't pull any pranks in class." The grin across Naruto's face wasn't a good sign. "I can't promise that, Iruka-sensei," Naruto said. Iruka sighed and went to pick up some papers on his desk, unknowingly triggering the seal that was under it. The next thing he knew was that all but his head, which was blocked by the papers he was picking up, was covered in orange paint. There was an outline of him on the blackboard. At this point, most of the class was snickering, and Naruto and Kita nearly fell out of their chairs. To say the least, Naruto spent his first detention after school. It had been 3 months since Naruto started in his new class. He quickly made friends with Choji and Shikamaru, but, for Naruto, class was as boring as ever. If you sat behind him, you could see that most of the time he had his textbook open. There was a Fuinjutsu scroll in it that he was reading. This caught the attention of Sasuke's twin sister Sasasha. What about Fuinjutsu had him so interested, and there were the pranks he was pulling. The paint launcher was just the first. He had transported a bucket of eggs on to their other teacher's, Mizuki, head. He had also been able to cover Iruka in feathers that were sealed to not come off until the chakra in the seal ended or Naruto cancelled the seal. Within a half hour of that, one Iruka caved with letting Naruto off of punishment to stop the snickering. Sasasha wondered what about seals had him so interested, other than the pranks that he was pulling. She thought that Fuinjutsu was just for sealing items and making bombs, but apparently that isn't all it could do. And today she was going to find out more about their new classmate and his interest in Fuinjutsu. Sasasha noted that the last few days Naruto had been going to the training grounds after class, and she was going to find out why. That day after school she followed Naruto to the training grounds. It wasn't like anyone was home waiting for her at home, and her brother was too busy in his own world to notice that she wasn't there. When Sasha got to the training ground, she saw Naruto checking over two ceiling tags that were about twice as big as the standard explosive tag. He set them up on two trees in the training area, and she hopped into a tree wondering what they were going to do. Naruto touched the tags for a moment, they glowed blue for a moment, and he stepped back. He unsealed a windmill shuriken and threw it between the seals. The moment that the shuriken got in between the seals, they shot out blue tendrils and caught the shuriken. Naruto was about to jump for joy when the seals overloaded and blew up. Sasha was so engrossed in the jutsu that when it exploded, it surprised her and she fell out of the tree that she was in. After she hit the ground, she groaned and slowly got up. Naruto saw her and said, "Who's there?" Sasha came into the field where Naruto could see her clearly and said, "Hey Naruto." "Sasha, what are you doing here?" Naruto said, recognizing her from class. "I was wondering why you found seals so interesting, so I decided to come and see what you could do with them," Sasha answered. Naruto looked at her confused and said, "Why didn't you just ask? It wouldn't be that hard to tell you why I like seals." "Okay, why do you like seals?" Sasha asked. "Well, at first it was to kill time over the summer after the academy last year, but when I started to learn I found out all that a seal could do," Naruto answered. "I mean, if you are advanced enough and know the right sealing formula, you can do jutsu without hand seals." Naruto finished excitedly. Sasha thought of the advantages that could give her and the fact that Naruto didn't use hand seal for his pranks. That would be a great advantage in a fight, Sasha thought. Maybe he could teach me something on seals. "Naruto, could you teach me about seals?" Sasha asked. Naruto was stunned for a moment. He never thought she would say that. He thought that she would just nod and walk away. She normally only talked to Hinata and Hanabi, the Hyuga twins, and these conversations were normally brief, never lasting too long. Naruto didn't know that they were the only people she could have a decent conversation with. All the other girls were fangirls of the last Uchiha. Even the Yamanaka heir Ino was a fangirl, and that disgusted Sasha. Naruto answered about 30 seconds later and said, "Sure." He was happy to have a new friend and someone to bounce ideas off of. Naruto pulled out the first scroll he got and tossed it to Sasha. She caught it and Naruto started to explain to her the basics. Over the next month, Sasha got to know Naruto after school and he would help her with the basics of Fuinjutsu. Most of the month was spent in the Uchiha library writing seals and getting better handwriting. Naruto looked through the library and was amazed at all the books but disappointed when the Fuinjutsu portion was so small. Over the next month there were times when Sasha would get frustrated with Naruto for his stupidity, but after getting to know him she realized her mistake. It wasn't that Naruto was stupid, it was that he was ignorant from basically raising himself. Therefore, she decided to help out with that. When he had those moments of ignorance, she would help explain things to him and let him use the Uchiha library. They got along well and would spar once in a while when Sasha got frustrated with seals. She was even able to help him a bit in his taijutsu. She also introduced Naruto to Hinata and Hanabi. Naruto was happy to have some new friends and help them learn seals too. Even though Naruto was confused as to why Hinata got all red and fainted all the time, Sasha on the other hand found it hilarious and teased the poor girl when they were alone. Sasha decided to keep Naruto ignorant of her feelings so she could have more fun. Naruto was able to explain to different levels of Fuinjutsu users. They were all at the beginner level in seals, which is just be able to understand basic formulas. The next level is an expert. They can deconstruct basic and intermediate level seals and can start to make some more challenging seals. The next level is a journeyman who in the old days would travel from place to place studying seals to broaden their knowledge, but now there are lots of sealing books so traveling isn't always necessary. Then there are seal masters who can deconstruct all kinds of seals and have at least 5 seals of their own making. So now that they were training together, they made a schedule for what they would do throughout the week. So it came to studying seals Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. They spar on Tuesday and Thursday and they study whatever they want on Saturday with Sunday off. This was the routine for the next 6 months. In those 6 months they all got quite a bit stronger. Naruto was almost done with the 10th book in the first scroll, and his taijutsu got better, finding that the hard fist style was a good fit, even if he bastardized it a little. He also got into elemental jutsu when he saw Sasasha's fire style, great fireball jutsu. He hadn't learned any but is reading some of the different kinds. Sasasha was getting better at seals but not even close to Naruto's level. She could use basic chakra seals to lock doors and scrolls, trap seals, and pretty good explosive seals. They were more advanced than the ones sold in most ninja stores, so she thought she was doing pretty well. Her taijutsu was getting better too, but what do you expect fighting 3 opponents at once? She learned 2 or 3 new fire jutsu but was working more on her seals. Hinata and Hanabi were at about the same place in seals, with the exception that Hinata was also working on healing seals. They both got better at the Hyuga fighting style. Hanabi was still better at the fighting style. With Hinata having the better chakra control and working with her friends, especially Naruto, her confidence went up a little. They both were able to turn on and off their Byakugan without hand seals by the end of the 6 months. It was a Friday after school and everyone but Naruto was at one of the more forested training grounds, as they had just found the tree waking chakra control exercise. Hinata was already at the top of the tree and Hanabi and Sasasha were making steady progress. Hinata sat on one of the taller branches looking down, asked, "I wonder where Naruto-kun is." "Probably working on that seal that we saw last night," Hanabi answered. "He was working on it pretty intently last night." "I hope it isn't anything dangerous," Hinata said. Sasasha snorted, "Like we could do anything to stop him." Hanabi nodded at that. The Hokage couldn't stop Naruto when he's working on a seal that he is fixated on. Hinata sighed and nodded her head. Naruto could be quite stubborn when he was working on seals. At this moment Naruto ran into the clearing and had one of the biggest smiles on his face that they had ever seen. He looked for them for a moment, spotting them up several of the trees and ran up to them. "It's finished," Naruto said. "So what is it this time?" Sasasha asked while hanging upside down on a tree branch. Naruto was about to speak when he closed his mouth and took out a seal, placed it on the ground and the field glowed blue for a moment. They recognized the privacy barrier. It was a round barrier that went about 20 meters from what they saw. That was an improvement over the last time they saw him make this barrier. They wondered what Naruto was going to show them. "What is the new seal you wanted to show us, Naruto-kun?" Hinata asked curiously. Naruto stood up and said, "I'm glad you asked, Hinata-chan. You see, I made a seal that will help us with our training speed quite a bit." They all looked surprised at this and Sasasha asked, "What seal is that?" Before answering, Naruto took off his jacket and shirt, which turned Hinata's face red as she put her hands over her eyes with an "eep." That didn't stop her from looking through her fingers at Naruto. Sasasha and Hanabi, seeing Hinata's reaction, giggled a little and Hanabi asked, "Not that Hinata doesn't like the show that you're giving her, but why did you take your shirt off?" Naruto looked confused at the first part but answered, "Because the seal is on my chest." Sasasha looked amused at Naruto's confusion and the fact that he still hadn't figured out that Hinata has a crush on him. Sasasha said, "You still don't get girls, Naruto. Anyway, what is the seal?" Naruto looked between the girls trying to figure out what the girls were talking about for a moment before shrugging and putting his hands into the ram seal and channeling chakra through his body. The effect was immediate as a seal appeared on his heart and stomach. The first one over this heart had a round center and a 2 in it. Then around that was a bigger circle that had interlocking circles in between the 2 circles, and on the other side of that circle was a web-like design that went out 2 rows. He had another one on his stomach that looked like a sun that had a swirl in the middle that had 8 lines going out from that swirl. Naruto answered while pointing at his heart, this is the chakra absorption and resistant seals. The resistant seal will make us stronger and faster. The chakra absorption will take some of our chakra while we improve our control, and it will give us more back when we increase our control or get low. The other one I'm still trying to figure out. All I know for sure is that it isn't hurting me, has a lot of security, and is containing something huge. Interesting, so you're going to give us the chakra absorption and resistance seals to all of us? Sasha asked. Yeah, Naruto said with a smile, it will take about an hour to put on the seal and we'll be good to go. What do you two think? Sasha asked, do you girls want the seal? Hinata wouldn't turn down a gift from Naruto and said, I think it's a good idea if it will make us stronger. Hanabi nodded her head and said, I think it's a good idea as well, but how did you put the seal on your chest by yourself? Naruto looked a little tired when she asked that and said, it wasn't easy, writing the seal from the reflection in a mirror, but I got it done. So Naruto, how do we get started? Sasha asked, knowing this seal would be complicated. Naruto blushed a little and said, well, I'm going to need you to take off your shirts first. Take off my shirt. Hinata stuttered with a shocked look and a huge blush on her face. Yo, you can't be serious. Naruto sighed, I won't lie to you guys. In order for me to give you these seals, I have to write them as close to your heart as possible. It uses your heart as a center point for the resistance seal to spread from, and the chakra absorption seal needs to be over one of the 8 inner gates to absorb the chakra from. So over the heart is the best place to put this seal. Naruto finished with a blush on his face. So putting it on our hearts will make the seal the most effective, right? It's not just you wanting to see us with our tops off, Hanabi said. Naruto nodded his head and Hanabi, having no problem with this, started to take off her shirt. Hinata, shocked at her sister's action, said, Ha Hanabi, what are you doing? Hanabi, not surprised at her sister's action, had not fully taken off her shirt, said, Naruto said it was the only place to put it and I see no lies in his eyes. Hinata considered her sister's point and said, I don't think he would lie about this just to see us new, but still, blushing harder at the last part. Naruto was about to step in to stop a fight before it started when Sasha put a hand on his shoulder. She said, turn around for a moment, Naruto, let me talk to Hinata for a moment, and walked over to Hinata when Naruto had turned away from them. Sasha walked behind Hinata and whispered in her ear, there's nothing to be embarrassed about, Hinata, it's just friends helping each other out. WWH, what if Naruto doesn't like what he sees? Hinata whispered as she fidgeted in Sasha's grasp. Sasha had seen what Hinata looked like under her jacket and thought, then he's either gay or beyond help in the intelligence department. She said, you have nothing to worry about, Hinata, you're beautiful, and in a few years Naruto won't be able to keep his hands off you. With a smile that grew the redder Hinata's face got. With Naruto turned around, Sasha got in front of Hinata and unzipped her jacket. Hanabi, figuring out what Sasha was doing, got behind Hinata and pulled the jacket off. Hinata was frozen in shock that her sister and Sasha were striping her in front of Naruto. Hinata had a body that most 15-year-olds would be jealous of, with a mid-high B cup at the age of 12. After that, her shirt and chain mail were off too, leaving her in only her bra. With that done, Sasha and Hanabi took off their tops, leaving them in their bras also, which soon fell off too. Sasha was at a large cup and quite proud of that, and Hanabi was just under her sister with a solid B cup. Sasha got behind a still shocked Hinata and popped her bra off. Get ready, Hinata, Sasha said as Hinata put her hands to cover herself as Sasha called Naruto to turn around. When he did, his jaw nearly hit the ground as he got a good look at them. Hinata was covering herself with her arm, but he could still see a lot more than he usually does. Sasha was beside Hinata with her hands behind her back, and Hanabi just had one hand on her hip waiting to continue. Sasha saw that Naruto seemed to have frozen and was just staring at them. She smiled and said, do you like what you see, Naruto-kun? Naruto nodded his head slowly and said, Wow. Sorry for wow. Wah, what were we doing? Sasha said, you were going to give us your new seal. That is if you remember it after looking at us. Hinata at his point was giving a good impression of a tomato and Hanabi even had a small blush on her face. It was good to know she could make Naruto speechless. Why don't you start with Hinata, Naruto-kun? Naruto nodded and unsealed a futon so they could lay on it while he applied the seal. Why yeah, Hinata, please lie down on this while I get the ink ready. Doing as he told her, she laid down and tried to relax as her crush came over and knelt at her side and said, try to relax, Hinata, you're beautiful. Hinata blushed harder if that was possible and said, go ahead, Naruto-kun. Naruto nodded and he got started to draw on the left side of her chest. She giggled cause it tickled and Naruto smiled and said, it's good to see you smile but try not to laugh. The faster I get this done the faster you can put your shirt back on. Hinata nodded and let him continue. Sasha and Hanabi looked at the seal being written. The first one was done in about 20 minutes and the sealing language covered a little move then half her chest. Naruto ran through a few hand seal and put his hand on the center of the seal which was Hinata's. Hinata had never been so embarrassed and it could have been her imagination but she thought she felt Naruto squeeze a little. The next seal took about the same amount of time as the first and as Naruto activated this one something surprised Hinata. It started to spread to cover her arms and legs and put her in pain. Hinata looked with pain on her face and said confused, it who hurts Naruto-kun. You didn't say it would who hurt. Naruto looked a little sad and said, I know Hinata-chan, I was afraid that it would scare you into not wanting it. It will be over soon. No fair, Hinata moaned out. But like he said it was over a few moments later. She was breathing a little hard but the seal was done. She looked down and it looked just like Naruto's only with a 0 in the circle. Hanabi asked a little concerned, are you okay? How did it feel? I'm okay. It felt like when you get a bad scrap but all over, Hinata answered. After that Hanabi was the same way but when Naruto was about to start on Sasha saw a small scar about 2 inches long where the center over the seal was going to go. Naruto looked a bit confused because it looked like a stab wound but that wasn't possible. If she was stabbed there it would have gone through her heart. Sasha saw where he was looking and sighed, Naruto, my heart isn't on the left side, it's on the right. Naruto looked even more confused so she elaborated, I have dextrocardia, it's a condition where all my organs were made on the opposite sided they were supposed to. That doesn't explain the scar over where your heart is supposed to be, Naruto said. Sasha smiled ruefully and said, it was a parting gift from my older brother. Hinata and Hanabi's eyes widened at that as they knew all about the Uchiha massacre and knew that Sasha escaped that fate on a technicality. Naruto, not being in a clan, didn't know all the details about the demise of the Uchiha. Your brother Sasuke stabbed you, Naruto said shocked. No Naruto, it was our eldest brother. Itachi is the one who stabbed me through my chest and he is also the one who massacred my clan, Sasha said. Naruto was speechless and she continued, I probably used up all my luck that day when he ran me through and didn't check if I was dead. I lived because of a medical abnormality. That is why I try to have fun every day, not brood like Sasuke does. How can you move on from something like that? Hinata asked. I didn't have much of a choice, it was either that or I end up like Sasuke, and I don't want that, Sasha said. Not that I wouldn't jump at the chance to kill Itachi, I'm just not going to go out of my way to find him. How could someone do that to their own family? Naruto said, finally coming out of his shock. I don't know, Naruto-kun, but it isn't something that you have to worry about, Sasha said as she stroked his cheek. She continued, now can you give me the seal, Naruto-kun, I'm getting a little cold. This brought Naruto out of his slightly angry state and got to work on the right side of her chest. After that he explained a bit more about the seals. Naruto explained how to raise the resistance seal's level by channeling chakra to the seal and how to make it go to 0 by making the bird seal and saying Kai. After that they did some light sparring to get used to level 1. At the end of the day, it was just Naruto and Sasha sitting in a comfortable silence when Naruto said, "Sasha, if you ever do find Itachi, don't go after him by yourself." Sasha smiled. "I won't, Naruto, that is what I have friends for." With that said, they got up and went their separate ways. Naruto was in the Uchiha library working on the security seals for most of the jutsu and ninja-related information scrolls for all the people in Naruto's little study group. There were obviously no Uchiha seal masters and few journeymen because it didn't take too long for Naruto to break some of the low-level jutsu and a section on something called henjutsu, whatever that was. Naruto's curiosity getting the better of him, he grabbed a scroll on henjutsu and started to read. It was a scroll on female anatomy and pleasure and pain nerves. Naruto's first thought was to put it back on the shelf, but for some reason he couldn't, and before long there were two more scrolls on the table in front of him. One was on the same subject, the other was a jutsu. Sasha walked into the library with a box of poke in her hand, looking to see if Naruto had made any progress. She came to see Naruto reading a scroll with a blush on his face and raised an eyebrow. "Naruto, how's it going with the seals?" Sasha asked and picked up one of the scrolls he was looking at. Naruto nearly jumped out of his skin when Sasha talked and scrambled to grab the scrolls that were on the table. Unfortunately for Naruto, Sasha had already grabbed one and sat down to read it. Naruto was sweating bullets as Sasha continued to read, and worst of all, Naruto couldn't see her reaction on her face because of the scroll. "Naruto," Sasha said, enjoying some little reading. "This isn't what it looks like," Naruto said quickly. "Really, Naruto? Because it looks like you are looking into the art of seduction," Sasha said in an even voice while continuing to read. "I just wanted to know what henjutsu was," Naruto said. Sasha looked up from the scroll. "I think that would be obvious with the first scroll, not the first three scrolls," she said. "Well, it was. Interesting," Naruto said. "Do you not like me anymore?" Naruto asked nervously. "No, Naruto, just because you read these I don't think less of you, Naruto. I would be concerned if you weren't interested in the female body," Sasha said, putting down the scroll and running her hands down the sides of her body. Naruto watched her hands the entire time and it made Sasha smile. "Naruto," she said, getting his attention back to her face, "when you were reading these scrolls, whose body did you see?" "Mine. Hinata's. Hanabi's," she asked. Naruto, who was not expecting that at all, couldn't put together the words to answer. Sasha, still smiling, continued, "I mean, you have seen yous all topless." To tell you the truth, all four of us." Naruto answered. "You mean you doing this to us?" Sasha asked. Naruto answered, "Yes and no. I have thought of that and what I would look like as a girl." "Really?" Sasha said. "Yeah, and while I was thinking about it I thought of something." Sasha, why is yours, and a few others have seen, girls' bodies developing so quickly? Naruto asked. Sasha nodded her head at that. It was a good question and one she had the answer to. Girls who take their ninja training seriously and have higher levels of chakra will find that their bodies develop faster so the body can keep up and control their chakra better. I think it's the same for boys too. So all the girls chasing your brother complaining about their development in class would just have to train harder, Naruto said. Sasha nodded and said, "Yes, they would. Those in clans like Ino would grow a little faster than Sakura would because being a ninja's in their blood." With that said, she looked back at the scroll. "Made any progress on the seals?" Naruto relaxed and nodded. "Yeah, I got some of the low-level jutsu unlocked, but the seals are getting more complicated and compact, so it is hard to see them all." "Don't worry, Naruto, you've got plenty of time," Sasha said. After that, he got back to work. Over the next 2 months, Naruto learned that he was a wind user and even learned a jutsu with it, wind style, great breakthrough. He also started to increase his chakra control and wind chakra, but that was slow going at best. He continued to study henjutsu in his spare time, but only Sasha knew he studied that. Sasha would even help him a few times, but Naruto had only given her a few messages after long spars. He was getting good at those and, you know what they say, practice makes perfect. Sasha knew where Naruto was at now. Hinata would be putty in his hands. He was getting better every time she got a message, and she was getting to know what to look for if someone was trying to seduce her. She is the last female of her clan. The school year was over and summer just started, and Naruto and his friends were training in an empty training field. Naruto had a leaf in his hands and was trying to split it. Sasha was doing the fire chakra exercise, which was to burn a leaf to ash in just 1 second. Hinata and Hanabi were working on the Hyuga fighting style, but it was apparent who was better at it. Hanabi was at home with the rigid and quick strike style of the Hyuga clan, but Hinata on the other hand was having problems getting her body to stay rigid. It disabled one of her best advantages. Hinata was much more naturally flexible and the Hyuga style just didn't use that. Naruto was getting frustrated with the wind control exercise. He could only cut the leaf about halfway and he had been working on this for a little over 2 months. It didn't help that Sasha was closer to completing her exercise, but it still took about 10 seconds to burn the leaf. So he decided to finish a seal he had been working on for a little while. The new seal Naruto was working on was a chakra sensor seal that would display any chakra within a 200-meter area. He had gotten that part to work and the people in the training area were displayed on a 2 feet by 2 feet page of scroll. It worked great, but Naruto was trying to expand the seal's range. It took about an hour, but he finally got the seal to expand its range to that of 2 kilometers. When it worked, Naruto was ecstatic and started to look at some of the new chakra signals. They were in the training ground area, so there weren't many more, but he did see 3 new signals. At least he thought there were 3 because one kept going in and out. At first he thought there was something wrong with his seal or they were at the edge of the seal's range. But he soon figured that wasn't it because there was one of the chakras that was even farther away than the flickering one. Naruto called everyone over and asked what they thought. The seal is working fine, but this one person keeps going in and out. Hinata answered, could it be that the person is hurt? Naruto thought for a moment and said, it could be. Let's go check it out, Hanabi said. They all nodded and headed off. They headed to the next training ground and looked for the 3 people on the radar. They got there and it wasn't too hard to find the 3 people, or should I say women. The first one was a woman with black hair that went to her shoulders with red eyes who was sparring. She wore what looked like white bandages with mesh armor under it with one red sleeve. The person she was sparring with was a girl whom was their age with brown hair that went to mid-back with a bard going down the left side of her face. She was wearing a simple purple kimono that had wraps around the middle with mesh armor under it. The last one wasn't wearing much at all, with a mesh under armor with an orange skirt and a tan trench coat. She had purple hair in a spiky ponytail with shaggy hair and light brown eyes. Naruto and everyone were in a tree looking at the 2 spar. Naruto looked at his map and saw that the girl's signal was the one that was coming in and out, and Naruto still couldn't figure out why. Naruto was scratching his head and said, she doesn't look hurt. Then what could it be? Said Sasha. Hinata, Hanabi, could you check what her chakra looks like? They did and they were confused at what they were seeing. The girl's chakra was mostly white with small patches that were the normal blue. Hinata and Hanabi told them this and it just confused them farther. While Naruto was thinking, he noted that something was wrong. Where's the other woman at? It only took a moment for all the girls to leave the tree as Naruto was wrapped up in ninja wire and pulled out of the tree. Naruto was put to the ground and soon found the woman that was missing as her foot impacted his chest to keep him there. The girls also found her when Naruto grunted from the impact. What do we have here? The women said, spies are getting small these days. Hey, I'm not a spy, Naruto exclaimed as he struggled to get free and untie me. All she did was tighten the wire. The others that were sparring stopped at this point and looked at Naruto and the others that jumped out of the tree. No, I don't think I will. Now, why were you watching us? The women asked. Why should I? Naruto asked. Because I'm second in command at torture and interrogation in the village, she said, we have ways of making you talk. Naruto looked a little scared for a moment but stuck to his guns. I'm not telling you nothing. A smile spread across her face and she said, well then let's get started, as she pulled out an elongated kunai. No, don't hurt him, Hinata exclaimed fearfully. The other women sighed and said, stop scaring the kids, Anko. The women looked at Hinata and asked, what are you kids doing here? Hinata looked at the women and then at Naruto, who was still struggling at the ever-tightening wire, who was looking at her and sighed defeated. Hinata answered, Naruto-kun was testing a new seal he was making. It was a chakra sensor seal and he got a strange reading, so we came here to find out what it was. The newly named Anko said, who was it coming from, thinking for a moment that it may be from the seal on her neck. It was coming from her, Hinata said, pointing at the girl who was currently behind the other women. Me, the girl said as everyone looked at her. Now that you know why we're here, untie me, Naruto yelled. Anko picked up Naruto and hugged him with his back to her and said, no, I think I'll keep you, as she licked the side of his face. Naruto didn't know how to feel about this situation he was in and looked to the others for help. The woman looked a bit tired and said, put the boy down, Anko, he's too young for you. Okuranai always ruining my fun, Anko said as the wires came off Naruto and he scrambled over to his friends. Kuranai got everyone's attention and asked, so what was wrong with the seal? Naruto frowned at her, calling his seal wrong, and said, nothing's wrong with my seal, something's wrong with her. Sasha and Hanabi face-palmed at that as Hinata tried to explain what was wrong with what he just said. Anko and Kuranai looked angry at that and the girl looked distraught at something being wrong with her. Naruto, sometimes you can really shove that foot in your mouth, can't you? Sasha said. Naruto looked at Sasha, while pointing at them, and said, they said there was something wrong with my seal. Hanabi stepped in and said, Naruto, that's not the point. I know calling one of your seals wrong is a sin in your book, but you just said that there's something wrong with her and that's rude. Pointing's rude too, put your hand down. Naruto just looked confused at this point and Kuranai said, okay, what do you mean that there's something wrong with her and why can't you get a seal wrong? And for that matter, how did you know we were there? And don't tell me it was from a chakra sensor seal. Their range is about 200 meters and I would have sensed you if you were that close, Anko said. Naruto answered, it was a chakra sensor seal and when I got the basic one to work I was able to extend its range to 2 kilometers. And for your information, once I got the basics down I have never gotten a seal I've made wrong. Hanabi continued where he left off. The other reason we think it's her and not the seal is that her chakra is mostly white with spots of blue. Stop calling me her. My name is Yakumo of the Kurama clan, the newly named Yakumo exclaimed, and what is wrong with white chakra? Most chakra is a light blue color with a few exceptions like Naruto's chakra is a dark blue color, but that is because he has so much of it, Hanabi said. Your chakra is white with small patches of blue that pop up every now and again. Can you use jutsu? Sasha asked. I can only use genjutsu and basic chakra exercises, Yakumo answered. This got Anko and Kuranai thinking. It sounded like Yakumo was missing part of her chakra, and if, as they were saying, her chakra was white and she could use genjutsu, that she had spiritual energy but very little physical energy. That meant that she could use genjutsu and even some taijutsu, but that would be hard without physical energy, and ninjutsu could be forever out of her reach. This left Kuranai a bit sad at the fact that her student could never learn and master some of the ninja arts. It did explain why their training had stalled. Why she could use tree walking and more than likely water walking, but past that there would be nothing more she could learn outside genjutsu. Anko on the other hand saw this as a way to more focus on the aspects of a ninja that she could learn. They could stop wasting half the day on Yakumo working on the basic 3. Anko saw the look on Kuranai's face and said, hey, don't get that look, Kuranai, this explains a lot and now we can narrow down her training now. Kuranai sighed and said, but this means she will only be able to master genjutsu. Yakumo was confused at this and asked what they were talking about. So Anko and Kurenai explained to her what they had figured out and what it meant. So without physical energy I can only use genjutsu and some taijutsu, because without physical energy after a while my muscles will fall like they're on fire. Is that right? Yukumo said. At her sensei and her friend's nod she continued, so be it, I already feel the burning on my muscles and now I can give up on ninjutsu so I can concentrate on my family's bloodline. Anko smiled at her statement but Kurenai didn't look so sure. Could Yukumo be a ninja without ninjutsu? There was the boy who got to be a ninja with only taijutsu but Kurenai wasn't sure she could push Yukumo in genjutsu and taijutsu like Guy, Lee's teacher, does for Lee only in taijutsu. Are you sure about this? Kurenai asked. Yukumo nodded with a determined look on her face and said, yes, I want to be a ninja and make my clan proud. Kurenai still didn't look too sure about this whole thing. Then Naruto got an idea and said, what if we helped her with the physical part of her training? Kurenai turned to them and said, how? Well, we could make a seal that cuts down on the burning sensation, but I would have to have help with that because I don't know much about the body, Naruto said and looked at Hinata. Can you help me, Hinata? Hinata looked surprised at being asked to help. You are the one of us that is looking into medical seals and probably know more about the body than any of us, Naruto finished. Hinata was surprised that Naruto thought of her. I don't know a lot. I'm positive that Yukumo's senseis would know more than I do, she said. Anko and Kurenai looked at Hinata and Anko said, I don't know a lot of medical ninjutsu, I just know poisons and antidotes, and Kurenai-chan is a genjutsu mistress. More importantly, do you really think you can make a seal like that? Anko finished talking to Naruto. Naruto smiles and answered, well, I made a chakra absorption and resistance seal to improve our training, so this shouldn't be more difficult than that. I just need more info on the body to know what I'm doing. We do know Hana Inuzuka, she's a vet but would help, Anko said. Kurenai was thinking hard on this and listening in on their conversion and asked, how long would it take you to make a seal like that? Naruto thought for a moment and said, I could probably have it done before we go back to the academy for our next year, so 2 months. Alright, if you can get it done by then we'll consider it, but if you can't I will have to look into alternatives, Kurenai said. Naruto, who was happy to be able to help someone with becoming a ninja, wanted to get right to work but Sasha stopped him saying that he should meet Hana first. He nodded and set a date for them to come over to his apartment then, Anko, Hinata, and Hana the next day. Hinata wanted to refuse but when Naruto insisted and said there may be more she could learn from Hana she caved like a deck of cards. The next day Hinata showed up first and saw that Naruto's apartment was a bit of a mess and suggested that they clean it before the others got there. When they finished cleaning the kitchen and the floor was when Anko and someone whom they assumed was Hana came in. Hana had pale skin and long brown hair that she had in a ponytail. She had the red fangs of the Inuzuka clan, like Kiba, and wore the standard Chunin vest that was open a little at the top and black shorts. She also had a tattoo on her upper right arm that resembles a flower. When they got there they stared to discuss the problem and possible solutions. It took about a week and a lot of work but they came up with an idea. They would make 2 seals. One would be a red blood cell production seal that would be on Yukumo's hips that would double maybe triple the amount of red blood cells in her body. The other would be on her throat and collarbone that would take in more oxygen to give to the red blood cells. With these 2 seals it would give what little physical energy she had and maximize its effectiveness. Now that was the easy part, the next part was making the seals, and that would take a few weeks. In this time it was mostly Naruto asking questions about the body and Hinata learning what she could from Hana. During all this Hana and Anko were also learning a bit more about seals. It was about a week in when Anko noted some scrolls on Naruto's desk in his room and looked at them. When she found out about the contents she had to laugh. Little Naruto was learning Henjutsu and the scrolls on his desk weren't the basics, they were more toward the intermediate level and a few jutsu. When she brought it up in front of everyone Naruto couldn't look at anyone and when Hinata found out what it was she invented a new red When Hinata found out that Sasasha was helping him in the art well, her mouth worked faster than her brain when she said she would help him practice too. That day was the best, and most embarrassing, in her life because like Sasasha thought Hinata was putty in his hands and while getting the massages she let out a loud moan. Hana and Anko were doing their best not to laugh but it was a losing battle. The seal was done about 2 weeks before the next school year so they got to work. Naruto told Anko to have Yakumo come in a bikini because Naruto would have to work on her collarbone and hips. This let Anko have her fun teasing him about wanting to see Yakumo. She left a blushing Naruto to give Yakumo the massage. The next day Naruto, Kurenai, and Yakumo met in the training ground they first met in and Naruto said to Yakumo, "Are you ready to get started?" Yakumo nodded her head a bit embarrassed and took off her purple kimono revealing a black bikini as she laid down on the ground. Kurenai was not happy about a boy seeing her student in that, especially after learning that Naruto is also learning seduction but Anko assured her that it was necessary. After she lay down Naruto got the ink ready and knelt next to her. "This will be cold and tickle a bit but try not to move," Naruto said. Yakumo nodded and tried to relax as Naruto got started on her neck and collarbone. The first one took about 20 minutes and when it was activated it looked like a choker with the word oxygen in a circle in the middle around her neck. The ones on her hips took a bit longer at 30 minutes and when activated looked like 2 elongated swirls with a thick black line with 4 prongs coming out on both her hips. With that done Naruto checked to see if the seals were working okay and when he saw they were he smiled at his work. Naruto took her hand to help her up and said, "The seal are working and it should take about 2 weeks for the red blood cell seal to reach its max production. The air seal should be working now and should also filter out poisons that are inhaled." Yakumo looked at the seals on her hips and felt the one on her neck and pulled Naruto into a hug. "Thank you for helping me to achieve my dream Naruto-kun," she said in the hug. Naruto hugged back and said, "I'm glad I could help." With this Naruto made a new friend and a new training partner. When Naruto was cleaning his desk one day he saw that he had a lot of seals around his apartment from all the practice he does. He relished now that when he learned the seal divide jutsu, that turns one large seal into multiple seals, he had to have dozens of explosive, trap, and security seals all over his desk. When he brought it up during a training session Sasasha said maybe he should sell them to a weapon shop as they also seal the basic seals and could probably sell his extra seals. The next morning Naruto put on the black silk slack shirt and pants that Hinata had gotten his for his birthday with and orange tie. He went shop to shop trying to sell his seals but he was having no luck in selling them and some of the time getting in the door. He now was going into a shop called the Steel Claw. When he walked in he saw a young woman, wearing a leaf headband, with brown hair that was tied in buns on her head. She had on a pink Chinese-style shirt with dark green pants that. The clothes were a bit tight and showed off her small B-cup, shapely hips, and long legs. She looked up from the magazine she was reading and said with a smile, "Hi, I'm Tenten, how may I help you?" "Hi, my name is Naruto and I was wondering if I could talk to the owner," Naruto asked. "Sure, let me go get him," Tenten said as she moved to the back of the store, where Naruto saw where the forge was. Tenten came back with a bear of a man that had short brown hair and a brown shirt and a black apron. The man said, "How may I help you?" Hi, my name is Naruto and I've been studying seal for a while and I was wondering if you would be interested in the seals of maid," Naruto said putting on his best salesman smile. Tenten about rolled her eyes at Naruto because there was no way a boy this young could know much on seals, he only looked about 13 or 14. She had been studying her last year at the academy when she looked into the art. "I mean if you have as big an interest in weapons as she does there is only so much room in your closet to put them." The man on the other hand knew not to judge a book by its cover. He did get some people to come in and try to seal him something about once a week. Sometimes people can surprise you. On the other hand that was only 1 out of 10 that came into his shop. "So let's see what you have boy," the man said. Naruto didn't like being called boy but let it go because he was trying to make money, and Hanabi said that he should work on his attitude a little not to be rude to people. Naruto got out a scroll and get it on the counter with a poof of smoke. There was 3 stacks of seals and a stack of metal ring and clamps. Naruto pointed to the first 2 stacks of seals and said, "These are explosive and flash seals," then pointing at the last stack, "And these are a sealing trap I call chakra threading." The man looked at the stacks and was a little surprised. The boy had at least 100 of each of the seals. As the man looked at the seals, that both the flash and the explosive seal had a timed and proximity triggers. He then passed the seal to his employee and looked at the trap seal. He had a decent grasp on Fuinjutsu and was impressed that a boy was advanced enough to make these. Tenten was thinking maybe she was a little too quick to judge Naruto if he could already make something like this. She could make something like that too. She was a bit more advanced than these seal, and when she looked at the trap seal she also understood those, but thoughts were probably her limit. The man looked at Naruto and said, "These aren't bad and there are quite a few of them, but what are the clamps and rings?" Naruto picked up one of each and said, "These are book and scroll security clamps. They can be set to blood, chakra, and password and have some durability seals on the metal so someone can't just break or cut them off. The seal would be work better if they were carved or forged into the metal, but I don't know how to do that. I know that they can take being thrown in a fire with a scroll, and both the clamp and the book or seal would be fine." Now the man and Tenten were impressed. The man know that those would seal pretty well and the other seal were good too. He knows Tenten could make these seal. Her knowledge in seal is part of the reason he hired her, and all the other seals would be quick sellers. "Tell me, boy, how many of these could you make in a day?" the man asked. "I could make hundreds if I put my mind to it," Naruto said. Tenten was shocked at this and asked how. "Is the seal divide jutsu. It lakes one big seal and splits them into smaller seals," Naruto answered. The man went behind his desk and pulled out some ink and a big sheet of paper and said, "Show me." Naruto shrugged his shoulders and got to work. Tenten and her boss were surprised at how fluid Naruto could write seal, and how his brush never seemed to run out of ink mid-stroke. When he was done they saw that it was a new type of seal. From what they could tell, it was a combination between storage and an explosive seal. After he was done he went there a few hand seals and touched the paper. The end result was 20 seal, about half the size of a normal seal. Then Naruto took out a few cases full of Senbon needles and put about 20 in each seal. With that done he took out a kunai and cut up the seals. Tenten and her boss looked at the new seal and saw that it was a trap seal that purpled weapons in a given direction. "Well, Naruto-san, I'm impressed that someone your age besides Tenten can make seal this good, so I'll make you a deal. I will buy some seals from you and I will even teach you to forge if you want," the man said. "How many?" Naruto asked. The man thought for a moment and said, "How about 500 a month of each of the seals we saw today, and if you chose to learn to forge I will want about 200 of each the book and scroll security sealing clamps." Naruto was shocked at the number. That would be 2,000 paper seals a month. He knew he could do it if he worked on it a day or 2 full days a month, but that was a lot of seals. "How much?" Naruto asked. If he was going to make that many seal he wanted to get paid. Man took out a piece of paper and wrote down some quick numbers. He figured he could make 1,000 yen on each trap seal and 3,500 on the clamps. So his total profit would be about 3.5 million yen. "I will give you 400,000 yen for the paper seals and 600,000 for the book and scroll security clamps. I will also teach you to forge the rings and clamps," the man said. Naruto's jaw about hit the floor at the number. With that kind of money coming in every month and learning to forge, he could buy just about anything he wanted. Naruto put out his hand and said, "You have yourself a deal." The man smiled and shook Naruto's hand as he knew this was the beginning of a very profitable friendship. While over the summer as Naruto was helping Yakumo on her seal, he started to learn some wind jutsu because by the middle of summer he had been able to split his leaf. He learned wind style gale palm, wind senbon, and he was working on making a wind clone, he still couldn't do a basic clone. Hinata and Hanabi decided to learn what their elements were. Hinata had water and Hanabi had earth. They started to learn their elemental control exercise for their elements. Hinata had to lift a 6-inch ball of water out of a pond and Hanabi had to turn a leaf to dust. They were all practicing with their element in one of the Uchiha training grounds with a small lake in it. They were all working with their elements. Sasha was finishing her control exercise and she nearly had it and was going to work on some jutsu next. Hinata was making the water ripple but no water was coming up. Hanabi had made about the same amount of progress with her leaf, only drying it a little. Hanabi looked up from her leaf and said, "There's a storm coming, I think we should get out of here." Sasha nodded and said, "Yeah, we should head home." Looking at the storm clouds rolling their way, it looks like a pretty bad storm. Naruto was going through hand seals for what must have been the 50th time and the wind picked up next to him. It started to turn into a Naruto shape. It had the arms and legs and most of the chest before it exploded into a gust of wind. Naruto caught his breath and said, "I want to get this jutsu down before going home." "Alright, don't stay out here too long or you might catch a cold," Sasha said. Hanabi turned to her sister and said, "Are you coming, Oni-chan?" Hinata shook her head and said, "I want to practice a little more before going home. I'll be home in a little while." "Okay, Oni-chan, don't stay out too long," Hanabi said as she headed home. Sasha saw this as an opportunity to tease Hinata a bit. She walked up behind Hinata and whispered in her ear, "Work hard on this and maybe you can ask Naruto to work hard on you." Sasha finished with a smile. Hinata turned red and went back to work with a little more determination now. Sasha then said bye and went home to her brooding brother. It wasn't 15 minutes later when Naruto was getting frustrated with the clone. He could get the body to form but the head wouldn't, and a headless would stay a moment before it exploded. In Naruto's frustration, he put in way too much chakra and a mini tornado touched down next to him. When the tornado vanished, in its place was a girl in her late teens with white hair that went down to her shoulders and electric blue eyes. She was wearing a blue-gray kimono with what looked like storm clouds on it. She looked at herself a little and what was around her and smiled. The commotion got Hinata's attention and saw the girl and looked from her to Naruto, wondering if he had an explanation. Naruto looked confused at the girl and asked, "How are you? Because you defiantly aren't my clone." "So this is the mortal plane," the girl said as she continued to look around and at herself, totally ignoring Naruto's question. Naruto took out a kunai and Hinata got into the Hyuga stance and asked again, "Who are you?" The girl looked at them with a big smile and said, "Hello, I'm Arashi. Who are you?" Naruto answered, "I'm Naruto. What are you and why did you appear where my clone was going to?" "I'm a storm spirit and it's always so boring as a spirit. All I can do is make storms like that one and throw lightning at people," Arashi said as she pointed at the storm clouds rolling toward them. "How I got here was that you used so much energy that I was able to use it to get here. It's so much more interesting here than it is in the spirit realm." "So you are just bored and desisted to come?" Naruto asked, confused. Arashi nodded and said, "It's so much fun watching you mortals try to gain control over our elements." "So you just want to have some fun here?" Hinata asked. Arashi answered, "Yes, it's so rare for a spirit to come here. It's fun to watch mortals use our elements in such interesting ways." "Arashi, what are the elements that you can use?" Naruto asked. "I can control the wind, water, and lightning. I use them to create all kinds of different storms," Arashi answered with a bit of pride. "Can you help Hinata out with her control on the water?" Naruto asked. "Sure," Arashi said, existed to help. They told her the exercise and she did it without moving her hand or anything. Arashi had Hinata do the exercise and she saw the problem. "You are trying to force the water where it doesn't want to go. You have to let the water flow into the ball and then lift it," Arashi said. Hinata took the advice and let the water flow. She swirled the water into a bulge on the water's surface. When she got about half a ball, it popped. At this point Naruto hugged Hinata and said, That was great, Hinata, you'll have this down in no time. Hinata blushed at how close Naruto was to her and hugged back. Arashi, would you like to stay with us? I'm sure we could have lots of fun together, Naruto asked. Arashi smiled and answered, I would love to, Naruto, and held out her hand to Naruto. Naruto took it and there was a pain in his right shoulder. He pulled up his shirt sleeve and there was the word storm that looked like it was branded into his shoulder. There, we have a contract and I'm now bowed to you, Arashi said. Contract? Naruto asked. Yep. Now I can come to this plane any time I want and you can call me to play or help you out, Arashi said. Cool, Naruto said as he looked at his shoulder. Arashi, is there a way for you to hide so it won't be too suspicious coming into town with you? Sure, Arashi said as she turns into an eagle. It was about 2.5 feet tall and had a white head with dark blue feathers with white tips. Beautiful, Hinata said. Thank you, Arashi said. Let's get out of there before it starts to storm, Naruto said as Arashi perched herself on his shoulder. They were walking through the Uchiha district when it started to rain and they took shelter in one of the abandoned houses. When they got inside and it started to pouring outside, they asked if Arashi if she could stop the rain, but she said no because it's easy to start a storm but stopping one is extremely difficult. Hinata was blushing at the thought of being alone with her. Well, mostly alone. Arashi was there but she was admiring her handiwork outside. Hinata desisted to go with Sasashi's suggestion and asked, Naruto-kun, could you give me a massage while we wait? Sure, Hinata, but you do know you will have to lose most of those clothes, Naruto said. Hinata, still blushing, nodded and said, I have a new bathing suit with me so I will just change into that. Naruto nodded and Hinata went into another room. He unsealed a futon that he had. Sasasha had been a bit demanding of his massages lately and he just carried one with him now. Next he took out a scroll with a jutsu on it he was going to try this time. It was called Heated Touch and it worked the deeper muscles and gave the recipient a sense of warmer and increased the recipient's their sensitivity to pleasure. Hinata came back into the room and was wearing a lavender-colored one-piece that was cut to look like a two-piece. The suit left her stomach and back exposed and the top and bottom were connected by a pair of silver rings. There was also another silver ring between both the cups of the top. Naruto thought the suit looked good on her and said so to her, only making her blush harder. She said a quick thank you and lay down on the futon. Naruto desisted to take off his shirt and Hinata had a hard time looking away from him. All the spars with them and his recent interest in forging had been great to his body. Naruto started with a normal massage and worked her shoulders, back, and legs. Hinata was trying not to be vocal about what she was feeling, but it was hard. She was still giving small groans and moans in pleasure as Naruto worked her back. This was music to Naruto's ears and he worked to find the notes in Hinata's muscles and find the places that were the most pleasurable to her. He found that she reacted to most of what he did, be it, but she was the most vocal when Naruto worked her back. That might be because of the near-D cup she had on her chest, which Naruto wasn't complaining about. When he was done with the basic massage, he went into more detail with the heated touch. Hinata really tried to keep her voice to a minimum, be it was hard, but when Naruto's hands started to heat up and reach deeper into, she resisted, for about 7 seconds. After that there was no more groans, they were all soft to mild moans and she just couldn't stop them. Her body seemed to heat up and the heat seemed to travel to her and between her legs. Naruto during all this was enjoying all the sound she was making and was trying to make her make new ones. After he started to use the heat touch, Hinata started to smell really good. He had found out one day working with Hana that he could smell better than most people, not as good as an Inuzuka, but still pretty good. The smell kept getting stronger and when Naruto was working her legs and thighs, when he found the sources of the smell. When he was working the inside of her thigh, Naruto touched a clear liquid and from all the books he had read he knew what it was and desisted to have a little fun. Naruto took her finger out of her mouth and Hinata's eyes came back into forces as she looked at Naruto. There was no blush on her face for once, still riding her sexual high, as she wrapped her arms around his neck. I love you, Hinata said in a clear and loving voice and pulled Naruto down for a kiss. Naruto was stunned at her words but slowly melted into the kiss, which was quickly becoming more heated. Hinata got to know what she tasted like and Naruto got to tasted Hinata's tonsils. They finally blocked the kiss so they could breathe and Naruto looked into Hinata's eyes and saw nothing but love and lust. Did you mean that, Hinata-chan? Naruto asked. Yes, Naruto-kun, I've had a crush on you for a long time and when we started to train together it slowly turned to love. I never told you because I didn't want to be rejected, Hinata answered. She smiled and ran her fingers through Naruto's hair, and to think, all you had to do to get me to say it was to make it so I couldn't think straight. Hinata-chan, I can't tell you I love you too, Naruto said, which made Hinata look sad. He continued, I can't because I don't know what love is, Hinata. Maybe you can show me, Hinata-chan. Naruto finished putting a hand on Hinata's cheek. Hinata smiled at that last part and said, I'll try my best, and brought Naruto in for another kiss. I think we should stop now if you don't want to go farther because I'm hard as a rock right now, Naruto said. Hinata couldn't help it and looked down at his pants and saw that he indeed was. She blushed and nodded her head. They got up and Hinata got into the other room to change. When she got into the other room she couldn't help herself and turned on her Byakugan. Naruto was at full mast at 6.5 inches at the age of 13. Hinata knew he had a few more years to grow and that he was going to make her scream in the near future. Naruto walked up to Arashi and held out his arm and she jumped on. He started to stroke her head and said, Did you enjoy the show, Arashi? Oh yes, it was interesting to see a mortal mating ritual up close, Arashi said. Naruto looked embarrassed and said, Well, we didn't mate, that was just foreplay. You were just playing. Can you play with me like that? Arashi asked. Naruto, still blushing at the question, and said, Well, if you want, I would have to ask Hinata first because I'm pretty sure we're boyfriend and girlfriend now. Hinata came out at the boyfriend comment and blushed but asked, What did you have to ask me, Naruto-kun? Naruto turned to her and said, Arashi saw what we did and asked if I could play with her like that. Hinata turned red at the question and that she forgot that Arashi was there. She answered, I don't mind if you play with her or the others, just don't go any further than we have. Naruto smiled and said, Okay, Hinata-chan, as he held out his hand, which Hinata took, and pulled her to him and spun her around and put her back to his chest. He put her in a one-arm hug and whispered in her ear, and maybe you can help me practice more. Hinata shivered at the comment and reached up to run a hand through his hair and said, I'd love to. Naruto looked outside at the weather. It had stopped raining momentarily, so they desisted to run home now before it started again. When they got to Hinata's compound first and said a quick goodbye and a kiss on the cheek. But they were seen by someone and that someone went back into the compound after they saw. Hinata was on cloud 9 on her way to her room. She had told Naruto her feelings and he accepted them. When she got to her room she desisted, she needed a bath to get rid of the smell of off her. When she was getting her stuff she didn't notice his door open and closes quietly. The person got behind her and said, Did you enjoy your time with Naruto-kun, Oni-chan? Hinata jumped and turned around to face Hanabi, and from what I smell you enjoyed it a lot. Hinata blushed at already being found out and tried to play it off. Yes, I did enjoy it, but what smell are you taking about? Don't give me that, I've walked in on you in the thongs of passion on yourself. I know what it smells like, and that goodnight kiss Naruto gave you at the door makes it pretty easy to know something happened, Hanabi said. Hinata knew she had been caught and said they would talk in the bath. When they both had their bath robes they went to the hot springs that were in the compound. They set up a privacy seal and took off their robes and got into the water. Hanabi asked what happened and Hinata told her all of it, from the storm spirit to the goodnight kiss at the door. Hanabi was happy that her sister got her feelings out to Naruto and that her sister didn't stop Naruto from giving them those killer massages. Maybe she will go for what Hinata got next time. Hinata asked if anything interesting happened at home. Hanabi said it was the same with the elders pushing her to best Hinata in their monthly spars and it was really getting on her nerves. Maybe she could do something to get back at them. It was reaching the end of the summer and Naruto thought about what he had accomplished in this short summer break. He had helped a clan heiress on her way to becoming a ninja. Hanabi said having a clan heiress owe you a favor was a great thing. Naruto was just happy to have a new friend. He had learned some forging, enough to make his ring and clamps. Naruto went with the metal pressing option to make them. That was when you took a hammer with the seal carved into it and you hammer out the seal onto the rings and clamps. Tenten had been a great help with the making of the rings and clamps. He had to pay her of course, but it was a small price to pay for Naruto. He was still making enough money to get whatever a 13-year-old boy could ever want and then some. Tenten turned out to be a great friend for Naruto to make. She was an orphan also and had nothing against him and also started to learn seals from Naruto. She had just graduated from the academy and had been top kunoichi. She was on a team with some people whom she called eccentric. He was not one to judge but one day, when he came to pick her up from her team to help him with forging it was an interesting day. Tenten's teacher was a guy named Guy and he was an interesting person. He had a bowl-cut hair with the biggest bushy eyebrows that Naruto had ever seen, he could swear they were moving on their own. He wore a green one-piece training jumpsuit with orange leg warmers. The man also had a tendency to go into long speeches about nothing but the flames of youth and Tenten said if he ever starts spouting anything about the flames of youth, like her teammate does now, she wouldn't help him anymore. Tenten seemed to be able to use any kind of weapon from a sword to a battle axe and seemed to know the basics of all the weapons she used. She knew more than the basics with a sword and long-range weapons and in the use of wires but she seemed to know next to nothing about most elemental jutsu other than she had a lightning affinity. Naruto had given her a book from the Uchiha library about elemental manipulation and just lighting chakra by itself. Hanabi had recently taken an interest in electronics and how they worked and with the money that Naruto now had he had bought her some books on the subject. He had also got her some electronics that he could get his hands on like wireless radios, normal radios, TVs, and he even convinced Anko to give him one of the broken computers in her department and a radio dish. The computer and radio dish would have been near impossible to get new because of how rare they were and how hard they were to make. When Naruto gave Hanabi these she gave one of her rare shows of emotion and just had to thank him for the early birthday present. It was a great day to be Naruto and it went down as one of his best days next to the day he discovered seals and the days that he spent most of his day practicing henjutsu with Hinata turning her into a pile of mush. Sasha even took up the violin because she saw that everyone else had a hobby and she decided to get one. Naruto had forging and fuinjutsu. Hanabi had her electronics. Hinata liked to study flowers and other plants. Yakumo liked to paint. Tenten liked to study books on old weapons. It was easy for her to get lessons as she was the last Uchiha's sister. It was almost too easy and that just pissed Sasha off. Her brother could get most anything he wanted if he showed the smallest interest in it. She wasn't going to pass up a free opportunity and she took the few free lessons with a few beginner's books the owner of the shop gave her. Naruto was taking it easy today and was finishing up one of the fuinjutsu books that he had gotten from his Jiji. At the end of the book he saw some sealing notes that he saw on a lot of the books, but this one looked different as it had a little over half a blood seal on it. The seal just seemed to run off the page. He looked at the other books he had seen notes on the back covers and looked at them more closely. It took Naruto about an hour but when he was done he was left with 20 books. Out of all the books Naruto was given, most of them had notes on the back but those he picked out stood out as a real seal and not just notes. When he set them up there were a security word and a blood seal. The seal was overly complicated to hide what it really was. He first tried the word seal putting in the name of the village, the names of the Hokages, and some of the clans. After that he took a closer look at the seal and a word seemed to come to him, Uzumaki. He wondered why it would be his last name that worked the lock, but he just used it and the first part of the seal unlocked. All that was left was the blood seal, and if his name unlocked the first seal, he used his blood on the second. With a puff of smoke there was a 3.5 feet long 1 foot wide scroll. It was dark blue with a crashing wave design on both ends of the scroll. There was a note on the front of the scroll on a red swirl emblem keeping the scroll shut. He took the note that turned out to be a letter and read it. Dear Naruto-chan. Hello honey, this is your mother. If you are reading this, I'm no longer among the living. I'm sorry my little Naru-chan. My name is Kushina Uzumaki and I'm originally from the land of Whirlpool's Uzushiogakure, and I am a part of the Uzumaki clan. I was sent to the Leaf Village to promote continued friendship between the two villages. But soon after I left, our village was attacked and the village was all but destroyed. Most of our clan's heirlooms and teachings were almost lost, but the clan head at the time was able to save them in the scroll in front of you. He used Fuinjutsu to make the scroll go to the person who was the safest and the closest to the head of the family. That was me, and at the age of 10 I didn't know what to do with it. But when I made Genin I looked through the scroll and learned much from it. I'm even in the bingo book as an S-ranked ninja as Whirlpool's Red Death. I wish I could have watched you grow up to the man you were always meant to be. I love you Naruto-chan and I always will. Naruto was crying by the end of the letter, but there were two things on his mind. He needed to protect this scroll and he was going to have a talk with the old man. Naruto took the Uzumaki scroll and sealed it in a seal on his wrist and ran to the Hokage's tower. Naruto walked up to the secretary in front of the Hokage's office and asked if he could see the Hokage. This concerned her a bit because Naruto always called the Hokage Jiji when he came by and said that the Hokage was free and let him in. Naruto went to the chair in front of his desk and said, "Hokage, we need to talk." This also surprised Sarutobi a great deal as when he looked at Naruto he didn't have his normal smile on his face. Sarutobi said, "Hello Naruto, how is the Fuinjutsu study going?" "Good, I'm into the second set of books and I'm almost done with them, but that isn't why I'm here. In those books there was a word and blood seal and I went to know if you know the name Kushina Uzumaki." Naruto asked. The Hokage sighed at the question. He expected to have this conversation with him but not now and asked, "Where did you hear the name from?" Naruto pulled out the letter and said, "From this letter she wrote to me." Now there was no way out of this. The Hokage said, "She was your mother Naruto. I was going to tell you about her when you made Chunin and I will tell you about your father when you make Jonin." "Why?" Naruto said in a controlled voice. "You have to understand Naruto, they had many enemies that wouldn't give it a second thought about sending ninja to kill their child," Sarutobi answered. Naruto was angry and exclaimed, "I don't care old man. All I ever wanted to know is if they loved me. You could have at least told me that. All that you ever told me was that you didn't know who they were." Sarutobi sighed again expecting this and said, "I couldn't risk you asking me more questions about them, they had enemies in this village too. It would only take one misstep on my part to give them all the information they needed to figure out who your parents were. And that is something I couldn't let happen." Naruto was silent for a moment and went through the breathing exercises that the girls taught him so he wouldn't lose it and asked, "Did they leave me anything?" "There were a few things but you have to be a ninja for some of them. I can give you some books, scrolls and your mother's sword. You already have your mother's Fuinjutsu books," Sarutobi said. He got up and went to the same safe he went to get the first set of scrolls he got. When he came back he had about 10 scrolls and handed them to Naruto. Naruto looked at the scrolls as the Hokage put them in front of him. There were some on forging and some metal to work with. There were a lot of spare weapons. Then he got to his mother's sword and took it out of its scroll. It was beautiful. It had a dark blue sheath with silver accents and a red hilt. Another scroll came out with the sword and it was a kenjutsu style. He pulled out the sword a bit and saw that it too was a dark blue color and it was polished to a beautiful shine. "It's beautiful," Naruto said in a soft voice. "That it is. Was there anything else you wanted Naruto?" Sarutobi asked. "Yes. Do you have a bingo book with her in it?" Naruto asked. Sarutobi thought for a moment and went to one of the bookshelves in his office, looked through it quickly, and picked one out and handed it to Naruto. It is separated by village and in alphabetical order. Sarutobi said. Naruto nodded and left the Hokage's office. When Naruto got home, he called Arashi and told her to tell the girls that he wouldn't be coming to train today because he had a lot to think about. So Naruto started going through the scrolls he got from the Hokage and the Uzumaki scroll to see what was inside them. He went through the forging scrolls and found that had some techniques to make seals into metal, and one of them was the ways he was making his, but there were others. In one of the others there was a small library and Naruto didn't have enough shelves to put them all, so put getting more on his to-do list. There were a few scrolls with all the spare weapons Naruto would need for a few years, and he put that one over to the side to look at them all later. Then he got to the Uzumaki scroll and started going through that. There was everything from history to ninjutsu. Naruto couldn't get the grin off his face when he got to the Fuinjutsu section. It was huge. He thought he should start with history to get to know more about his clan and where they were from. He found out that this clan was from a village called Uzushiogakure, which was in the land of the whirling tides. They were a relatively peaceful people that lived on a series of islands that were protected by natural whirlpools and away from the mainland during the Warring Clans era. He also found out that the Uzumaki clan helped in the creation of the Hidden Leaf Village. They acted as the neutral ground that the Senju clan and the Uchiha clan used to meet and negotiate the creation of the new village. Over many meetings they came to an agreement, and when the Senju and the Uchiha came to this agreement, many other clans, not wanting to fight the two clans at once, quickly joined. With many other clans joining them, the Leaf Village quickly grew, and the other clans, fearing what this new village could do, quickly made their own villages to try to match the Leaf Village's strength. As a show of friendship and alliance, the Leaf added the Uzumaki swirl to the back of their flak jackets. He also found out that he had a bloodline. It was a body-based bloodline that gave him much larger reserves of chakra, increased stamina, and an accelerated healing rate. An Uzumaki could even lose a hand, leg, or arm, and if he were to survive the event, the part of the body could grow back in a few days. He also learned that an Uzumaki could use their blood to heal others if he were to put enough chakra into it. The next thing he found out was that an Uzumaki's mind was wired to read Fuinjutsu as if it was a book, which seemed to be a bit of a double-edged sword. They were known throughout the world as the best in the world, as it was said that one Uzumaki seal master was worth 5 of any other. When Naruto read this, he knew he had a long way to go. But being known throughout the world as the best sealers got them some enemies, and one day during the Second Shinobi War Uzushiogakure was nearly wiped off the map. He got to a section of the scroll that had crafting and forging materials. If Naruto was reading the scroll right, there was at least 4 whole dragon hides with the bones. There was also a sea serpent that was 60 feet long with the bones. It even had a large quantity of chakra metal, and all of this could be melted down into weapons. If Naruto desired to sell any of this, which he wasn't, he would make tens of millions of yen and he would be set for the rest of his life. Naruto must have been at it for hours, as when he looked out the window the sun was already setting. He was thinking about what he had learned for about 10 minutes before someone knocked at the door. He got up to answer it and opened the door to Hinata, Hanabi, Sasha, and Tenten standing at his front door. "Hello Naruto-kun, you didn't come to training today, which is really odd for you, so we decided to come over and see what was wrong," Sasha said. Naruto looked at all the girls and saw that they weren't going to be going anywhere until they got an explanation and invited them in. They saw a lot of books on his dining room table, most of them open, on all sorts of different subjects. The girls had a seat at the table and Naruto laid up against one of the walls in the kitchen. Naruto sighed and said, "Nothing's wrong, I just got some information that is taking a little while to accept." Hinata asked, curious, "What did you find out about?" Naruto sighed again and knew he had to get this off his chest, and he knew that his apartment was secure from the outside. He wouldn't practice henjutsu in his apartment if it wasn't because that would lead to a lot of questions he really didn't want to have to answer. Who wanted to talk to the Hyuga head about why his daughters were on his bed? He said, I found out who my mother was. The news surprised everyone in his apartment, especially Tenten, because as an orphan it was a dream come true to know who your parents are. Tenten asked, who was she? Her name was Kushina Uzumaki. She was a Jonin from this village, Naruto said. It only took a moment and Tenten was nearly on top of him with stars in her eyes and said, your mom was Whirlpool's Red Death. She surprised the hell out of Naruto because she must have shunshined in front of him. Naruto said, yes, I think that was her name in the bingo book I got from the old man. Wow, Tenten, talk about a fangirl moment, Sasha said with a smirk. Tenten turned and pointed a finger at Sasha and said, this is not a fangirl moment. Kushina Uzumaki is one of only 4 kunoichi that have ever been given an S rank in the bingo book. All the other girls were surprised at that and Tenten continued, she is one of my heroes and she is one of the few people that can match one of the Sannin in a fight. Her skill with a sword was said to be better than that of the 7 swordsmen of the mist, and paired with her skill with water jutsu being just below that of the second Hokage, she was nearly untouchable on the battlefield. Is that true, Naruto-kun? Hinata said. Naruto sighed as he rubbed the back of his head and said, yes, from what I learned today that's all true. If you want to look at her entry in the bingo book, it's on the table, pointing to one of the books in front of Hanabi. Hanabi saw the bingo book and picked it up from where it lay open face down on the table and looked at the entry for Kushina Uzumaki. It had all the information that Tenten had said and a bit more. Like Kushina Uzumaki was from Uzushiogakure, which was in the land of the whirling tides. It also said that she was one of the last members of the Uzumaki clan. Hanabi asked about the clan and Naruto said that yes, he was also a part of that clan and he had been doing some reading from the books that the old man had given him on his clan's history. He wasn't going to tell them about the clan scroll that he got, but told them about the scrolls that he got from the old man, including his mother's sword and the kenjutsu that came with it. When he mentioned the sword and the kenjutsu style, Tenten was almost vibrating with excitement and asked to see it. Naruto thought there was no way Tenten could be this turned on by the sight of the blue blade, and Tenten was almost drooling at the sight of it. She asked to hold it, but Naruto said no, and Tenten understood that the sword was going to be very important to him. She was able to look at the kenjutsu style though. She asked if she could learn the style and Naruto thought for a moment. He knew that the scroll that the old man had given him was mostly the basics and the rest of the style was in the Uzumaki clan scroll. So he said yes, but he wasn't going to be paying her for her help at the forge anymore. She took that as a small price to pay and agreed. They talked more of the history of his clan, but Sasha and Hanabi were only listening with half an ear as they thought about what they had learned. Naruto was the last male heir known to a clan that used to rule a country, and he may have to act as a clan head in the future. They had already been working with Naruto to help keep his cool, but they may have to do a lot more than that if he was going to be head of a clan. After the girls got all these questions out, it had already been a few hours and was starting to get dark outside. They could see that Naruto was more relaxed now that he had gotten all that out. He was still a bit on edge, and Sasha decided to help Naruto relax. Looking at the Hyuga twins, Sasha said, "You better get going, Hinata, Hanabi." Hinata looked a bit unsure. She also saw that Naruto was still on edge. "Don't worry about Naruto-kun, I'm going to stay the night with him tonight and I'm sure Tenten wouldn't mind staying," Sasha finished. Hinata and Hanabi looked at Sasha for once with the same expression, trying to figure out what Sasha was up to. They knew that they couldn't stay tonight with Naruto because they would have half the clan looking for them before they could even get to sleep. It was one of the things that Hinata wasn't able to do. Tenten blushed a little at the idea of staying with Naruto. She knew that he practiced henjutsu and she had even taken a course on the subject when she found out he did and learned more on the subject. Her team didn't know that she had taken the course, but she knew that her teacher probably does but didn't say anything about it. She was grateful for that. She had never really practiced the subject with Naruto, but she knew that it was only a matter of time. Don't worry, Hinata-chan, I'm not going to steal your boyfriend. I'm just going to keep him company tonight with Tenten, if she wants to, Sasha said. Tenten looked at Hinata and said, I'll stay if it is alright with Hinata-chan. Hinata thought for a moment and said it was okay and walked up to Naruto and gave him a deep kiss saying goodnight. Hanabi said goodnight and left with her sister. This left Naruto, Tenten, and Sasha in Naruto's apartment. 3 hormonal teenage ninja going through puberty that have studied henjutsu, what could possibly go wrong? Tenten and Sasha made dinner while Naruto read more about his clan, then they went to bed. Naruto got down to his boxers, which were black with little bowls of ramen on them. Tenten and Sasha giggled at that. Sasha striped down to a black bra and a black thong, and Tenten went to the same state of undress only with a white bra and thong. Naruto got a good look at them both and liked what he saw. Sasha had an athletic build with a B cup with a slim waist and hips that were just the right size for her body. With the black bra and thong on, her pale skin, not as pale as Hinata's, made a good contrast. Tenten on the other hand had a plumper build with a C cup with wide hips and legs that went on forever. Tenten's white bra and thong had the same contrast that Sasha had, but Tenten had nicely tanned skin. Naruto knew it was going to be a long, difficult night.